Good afternoon, all, and thank you for joining us for today's virtual workshop on effective cover letters. My name is Mallory Newby, and I am a career coach and assistant director at the University Career Center, and I'll also be your moderator for today's workshop. Please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A column, and we'll be answering those questions throughout today's workshop. This event is being recorded and will be available on our website at www.louisville.edu/career, along with our other previous workshops. Now, let's meet today's presenter, Bill Fletcher, our director of the University Career Center, as he shares his tips and advice on developing effective cover letters.
Thank you, Mallory. I appreciate the opportunity to be with everyone here today over the lunch hour and to talk about the difference maker, effective cover letters. Yes, we recommend that you have a cover letter to go with your resume. And in today's presentation, there's Mallory. I'm sorry, I'm not advancing the slides as I should. But in today's presentation, we're going to cover 5 topics, 5 goals, talking about the purpose of the cover letter and how it's used. We want to review the structure and format of the cover letter. Most importantly, in number 3 there, I want to cover the 2 basic types of cover letters. And it's very important because this ties into job searching and the workshop that I presented a couple weeks ago that's on our website called the Savvy Job Seeker. So the 2 basic types of cover letters, we want to discuss writing style and content, and then we will wrap up with a brief mention of other types of job search correspondence. So today's presentation is pretty much divided into about thirds. So we'll stop a third of the way through and ask for questions. So please put those questions as you think of them into the Q&A, and we'll pause periodically and answer questions as we move through today's presentation. So I expect to get this covered in about 45 minutes. So let's jump in and talk about the purpose of the cover letter. So you're introducing yourself to the potential employer. You're introducing your resume. You're helping to highlight certain aspects off of your resume, the more important aspects from your resume that relate to either this employer or this position at hand. You want to gear your resume to a particular position or a particular employer, and actually that should be your cover letter as well as your resume. So we want to make certain that we are targeting and tailoring in the job search process with our correspondence. You want to expand upon your resume. Keep in mind that your resume is a listing of phrases for the most part. And so now you're writing a letter, a cover letter that will add personal flavor and really relate it to the employer. And you want to motivate the employer to review your resume and basically invite you in for an interview, because the resume and cover letter do not get you the job, they get you the interview. Okay, so the offer only comes after the interview, and next month rather, Mallory is going to present on how to interview like a star. Situation, task, action, and result. You want to be a star in your interview process. And so a lot of the things that we've talked about in our previous workshop on resumes and job searching and now in cover letter, you'll see also come out in the interviewing process. So these are all connected processes. So understanding that your resume and cover letter are teammates. They work together in tandem with each other. They complement each other. So the cover letter highlights certain points from the resume in greater detail. It relates what's on that resume to the needs of the employer or the industry of the employer or the nature of the position. So cover letters should be result-based, not listing-based. So there is a distinct difference between resumes and cover letters. And with that, we can jump into a little bit about the formatting of the cover letter. So you'll see here on this slide, there's a gray block over there representing the page. And your cover letter is a business letter. It is business correspondence. And by business, I mean a formal business communication. So it's not written like a letter to a friend. It's written as if you're taking care of some business transaction. And so in that business letter at the top of the page, you will have your contact information. And whatever style you use on your resume or your reference page should be at the top of your cover letter. So you are developing a brand, if you would. So you see 3 different examples on this page here. I just like to point out that the example in the middle does not list the street address. And you will have heard in previous workshops that we've done that if you're posting your resume on more public places, boards, or networking sites, you'll want to make certain that you don't list your street address. It's just a safer thing to do. So that's why you see the different styles there. Note that everything is left justified, meaning starts at the left-hand margin and there's no indenting. That is the characteristics of a business letter, what is called full block style. And so you have the date, who you're sending your letter to, the salutation to the person receiving the letter. You have your introduction paragraph. You put blank lines between your paragraphs, your body paragraph and your closing paragraph, because we do not indent on the cover letter. Indenting would be something you would do if you were writing more of a casual letter to a friend or someone. So this is a business letter, flush left. You close it by saying sincerely or regards or best, and you type your name. You can sign it if you're sending it out in a print version. You could use some type of cursive font, or you could scan your signature, or you can just simply leave the space there because you have your name typed out. And the last item on the cover letter under formatting would be the notation that there's an enclosed document with it. So the enclosure is resume that is going along with this business letter, your cover letter. So with that, let's look at the sections. We have basically 3 sections of the cover letter. So your cover letter will be a minimum of 3 paragraphs. That's introduction, body, and closing paragraph. But your body paragraph could actually be 1 to 5 paragraphs. I think the important thing here is that you keep your cover letter to 1 page for most job searching opportunities, especially if you're a graduating senior. If you're a bit more experienced or going into education or research, it might be longer. But for the most part, all the research out there says 1 page. Keep in mind that people nowadays have a short attention span, so you have to write very concisely, and you have to make certain that you're getting your point across. Whatever font style you use in your resume, you should use in your cover letter. And I've already mentioned using the same heading style on the cover letter. So let's jump in and look at these 3 sections of the cover letter. So here are some things that may be, I'm not saying everything is, but may be in your introductory paragraph. Remember, as it says, introduction. Why are you writing? You know, what is the purpose of this? Are you seeking a specific position, a field? Did someone refer you to this person? Are you writing about a position that was posted? And if so, where was it posted? Do you know something about the organization? If you were reading in Louisville Business First, Louisville's business newspaper, that this organization is expanding, this might be a great way to introduce that, how you think that's exciting, and how you would like to have an opportunity to work for them. So your introduction paragraph needs to be clear about why the reader is receiving this. Obviously, you want to entice the reader to continue reading. And finally, and most importantly here, you want to have a transition sentence at the end of this paragraph. So this paragraph is probably 3 sentences, maybe 4 sentences long. You don't launch right into your sales about who you are, and you sort of introduce the concept, and that's why the transition sentence is important. Maybe you say something like, my A, B, and C skills would be of benefit in this opportunity or to your organization. Well, what are your A, B, and C skills? Those would probably be the paragraph or paragraphs that will follow after that. So that transition to keep them reading on into your cover letter. So some things I see in introduction paragraphs is people saying, hello, my name is. Well, you don't need to say that because it's a business letter. It has your name on it. So folks know who's writing to them because you're using a formal business letter. You want to capture attention, but you want to capture attention in a good way. So not in a gimmicky kind of way. So certainly if someone's referring you, or if you've seen a position posted, you want to bring that to their attention so that they know right away why is it you're reaching out to them. From there, when you transition, you'll transition into your body paragraph or paragraphs. So several things can take place in this one paragraph or multiple paragraphs. The most important thing I think to remember is that if you have a big, thick paragraph, then you need to stop right there. If it visually has a lot in it, you need to look at that paragraph and say, how can I make this a more streamlined paragraph? What is my topic sentence? And what are the 3, 4, maybe 5 sentences that will be in this paragraph? And what will they talk about? And some of the things you can talk about are your interest in the employer or the field, your KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities, and how they relate to the employer. Also, as I've said earlier, context. How did you develop these skills? And how will they benefit the employer? Don't talk about how the working for the employer will benefit your career, but how you will benefit the employer. Your knowledge of the employer, as I've said again, keeping it flowing so that you're enticing the reader to continue on. And part of that is grouping similar things together. You don't want just wildly separate items in one paragraph. So some of the things I've seen in cover letters that you shouldn't do, you should not use general statements. It should just not be overly simple sentences. And for that matter, we'll see in a minute, not overly complex sentences. You'll want to focus on how you can benefit the employer. So do not focus on how this would be great for your career. Do not focus on your deficits. I know that may sound strange, but I've seen people point out that they don't have experience in this area, but, well, it doesn't matter what comes after that but, because you've already fixed in the reader's mind that you don't have experience. So talk about where you do have experience and what your personal characteristics are. So you may have 1 or 2 or 3 body paragraphs. It's time to bring the letter to a close, and your closing paragraph is usually a formality. It's, usually protocol. There might be a summary or closing sentence that highlights your skills and interests. You'll certainly want to thank the reader. Absolutely ask for the interview. This is part of showing your interest, okay? You might say, thank you for your time and attention. I appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you. I would also appreciate the opportunity to meet with you in person, or I would appreciate the opportunity to interview in person. So that's part of being interested in being assertive in saying, I am confident in this opportunity, in exploring this opportunity. You can establish a follow-up plan. You can say, I'll contact you Wednesday of next week to follow up on this opportunity. If you say that, then you very well should follow up on it as you have outlined. However, if you don't say that, all correspondence needs to be followed up on at some time. Next week or the following week, you'll want to follow up. So if you refer back to the Savvy Job Seeker presentation that I did, I talk about the average week in terms of job searching, and part of that will be following up on past opportunities. Maybe that's past applications you've sent out and you have not heard from. So you'll want to follow up on your cover letters. And again, as we said, refer to the enclosed resume. That can happen in usually in the closing paragraph. You can refer them to the resume. So pretty much protocol in terms of the closing paragraph. So you think about it, one page, it's set up as a business letter, you're addressing it to someone, you have your introductory paragraph, a body paragraph or paragraphs you're closing, and then you sign it. And that pretty much gives you the structure and outline for the cover letter. So at this point, before we move into the two types of cover letters and writing style, let's see if there's any questions at this point.
Excellent information, Bill. We do have some questions here. The first question is, do I need a different cover letter if I have a CV and not a resume?
CVs are typically just a longer version of a resume. CVs are usually used if you're interviewing overseas, internationally, or if you're in research or education. So that said, yes, you need a cover letter to go along with your CV, as well as a cover letter to go along with your resume, and perhaps even more important for a CV, because CVs are longer. They do contain more information. So your cover letter will be important for picking out the important parts of that CV and bringing them to the immediate attention of your reader. So yes, absolutely a cover letter.
And how to address a cover letter? Should I say Mr. and Ms.? What's the protocol for addressing the individual?
Well, I will give you my advice on that. First of all, you should do your research and you should address it to a person. So you'll see if the person is listed as Mr., Ms., Doctor. I've worked for a religious Catholic university before, so you might have sister or father or something like that. So when the information is available, yes, you should use the appropriate title for the person. But if you don't know, or they might have a name that is not gender specific, or you might not know the gender choice of that person, then in this day and time with letters, it's okay to say, Dear Bill Fletcher, Dear Stacy Smith, and use their first and last name with no Mr., Ms., Doctor, or father or sister in front of it. So it's okay to use first and last name, and it's probably the way to go so that you don't make any mistakes along the way. Very good question.
And I have a few more here. Should I use cover letter samples as a reference to write my own? And can someone review my cover letter for errors?
Good questions there. There is, and I will mention this upcoming and in other sections, but you will not find as many examples of cover letters as you will examples of resumes, because resumes, again, it's really a form, and you're putting things in a particular section and you're listing things. You don't even have subject verb agreement because they're all written in phrases on the resume. But the cover letter, however, is where you bring it all together about you. It is uniquely you. So on one hand, yes, you should look at examples that are out there for cover letters. But on the other hand, you need to understand that you're going to sit down and sort of use this outline, introductory, body, and closing paragraphs to write about yourself in relation to the opportunity at hand. And that will get us into the next section about the two different types of cover letters. And repeat that second question that was in there, Mallory.
The second part was, who can review my cover letter for errors?
Okay, yes, we do review cover letters, really more or less for content, not as much for errors, but we can review them in the Career Center through our document drop program if you're a currently enrolled student or alum who has graduated within the past 2 years. So that is available for us to help you with. There is also the Writing Center on campus who can help as well. With writing and constructing all kinds of correspondence and papers and so forth. And what I tell everyone and how I wrap this up at the end is that this is a dynamic process. You are constantly working on your cover letter and tailoring it toward the direction you want to go. So it's not like you're going to write a cover letter and bam, you're done. This is something that's going to be part of your process ongoing, and that's just part of career management, managing your own career even after you're employed. So good questions. Any other questions?
We have one final question before we move forward. Would you recommend that a cover letter and resume be sent via overnight delivery to stand out?
Good question. I find that most applications nowadays are taken either online through someone's website, or they ask you to email them to them directly. If you are actually mailing it, for me, for personal peace of mind, I will mail it, but I will still follow up with someone in the organization to say, I have mailed it. You should be receiving it. Even for further peace of mind, you could mail it with tracking. Tracking is way less expensive than overnight. Overnight is going to be incredibly expensive. I don't think overnight is necessary to have it stand out. But if you are mailing it, tracking on it probably is not a bad idea in this day and time.
Thank you, Bill. That's all the questions we have at this point.
All right, well, let's jump in and look at the two different types of cover letters. So all of these will still follow the same business letter format. They will still have the introductory paragraph and body paragraphs, and they'll still have the closing, but you need to look at how the cover letter is used. So the first example is what is called a letter of application. And this is in response to a job posting or an advertisement for a position. So you know that some job exists and you've seen it, you've got a copy of the announcement. And so with this, you can tailor your qualifications to match what they've listed in that document. Okay, so you know it exists, you know it's there. The second type of letter, I generally call a letter of inquiry or inquiry letter. It could also be a prospecting letter. So you're expressing an interest in a particular organization for a particular type of position. you don't know that there is a current opening there. You have not seen an opening there, but you know that this employer exists and you're very interested in what they do. So you can contact the appropriate person there, utilizing your research skills, and send your cover letter, your inquiry cover letter, and discuss your qualifications and express any your interest in any opportunities that may arise within that organization. You take this type and you combine it with your research, and you combine it with your networking, and that is how most opportunities are obtained nowadays, through the networking, sending your inquiry letter, and getting an interview that way. But let's take a quick look on each of these two. So first of all, the application letter. Literally, if you take that description and you print it out and you highlight the key areas in that description, see what are they looking for? What do they say they're looking for? What do they put first in that job description, or how do they clarify what is most important? Sometimes they'll discuss minimum qualifications, and then they'll have preferred qualifications. So obviously, if you match the preferred qualifications, you will certainly want to highlight that. So in your cover letter, all types of cover letters, you want to put your most important information first, okay? So that it is read first by the employer. So that's why it's important to really analyze the job ad and to sort of break it apart and figure out how you're going to group your paragraphs on your cover letter to match what they are looking for in their job ad. Now, let's not let this replace the need for networking, because if you have a contact or can generate a contact within that organization, then that person can also help you understand what are the real hot buttons for the hiring manager in that area or for the organization, and can help you tailor that position to the person who will be reviewing it. So you also want to make certain that you mirror the language. So there can be different nuances in language. So if you're in a helping, caring profession, you may refer to clients, patients, or residents. So you want to make certain and pay attention to how they refer to their clientele, and you can mirror that same language also, so that you're helping the reader connect the dots in this application cover letter. Then the other one, which requires a lot more research, okay, but really all cover letters and all interviewing requires you to know your field, your occupation, and then researching employers who can offer opportunities in your field. So that is the inquiry letter. So you know you want to work in a particular field. Let's use social media, marketing, something to that effect, okay? And you know you want to do it for which type of employer. Is it going to be healthcare? Is it going to be government? Is it going to be in the transportation industry or construction? Is it going to be a major employer or a nonprofit employer? And really, how you craft your cover letter is important, because the things you may say to a smaller nonprofit organization may be worded differently than to a big corporate organization with a big corporate communication department and social media process. So that's where your research comes into play. Again, you are networking and you are finding people also. And if somebody says, hey, send your resume to so-and-so over in this department, then that really means send your resume and your cover letter, your inquiry cover letter, to that person. And in your introductory paragraph, obviously you want to point out that this contact of yours referred you to them for possible opportunities. And so you are expanding your network of contacts, and you're using your inquiry letter to do that. So you're sort of growing your network, but you really need to talk about your skills, abilities, and interests, or KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities, and how they benefit the employer. And that's very important, as I've said before, to put it into context. How did you gain those skills and abilities? Okay. To say, I have skills, I have communication skills, I have skills with social media. How did you gain those skills? And that's where the inquiry letter, and as well as the application letter, can highlight that information off your resume. So with that, those are the two basic points. The next section will be talking about the writing content. But before we get into that, I want to see if there's any questions about these two types of cover letters.
Let's see. We do have one question before we move on. What if I do not have a name of a person to send the letter to?
Okay, yes, good question there. You should research, but oftentimes it's not possible to have the name of a person, in which case I would say, dear hiring manager, or dear hiring professional, something to that effect. I would not use, by any means, would not use sir or madam, and I would not use to whom it may concern. All of those are just sort of passe, out of vogue, and even can be offensive when using the sir or madam. So I would say, dear hiring manager. Another thing to think about, you may not know the right person within the organization or unit, but you could always send it to the chief person in that unit. So if you see that there's a VP of the unit, you could address it to the VP of the unit. He or she may not be the person, and most likely is not the person who's responsible for the hiring. But usually what happens is that it gives you someone to address it to, and no one's going to be offended if you address it to the top person within the organization. Also, if you send a letter of inquiry to the top person in the organization and they're not the person handling the search, then they're going to send it over to the person who is handling the search, who is hiring for that position. And when you get something from your supervisor, you tend to pay attention to it. So it's not a bad strategy to send it a level or two up the chain of command. But again, networking is always the best option. Researching is a good option, but there are cases when you just have to say, dear hiring manager. Good question.
Another question, would it be acceptable to express interest in the organization in a letter of application?
Oh, absolutely. The letter of application where you're applying to a position and the position has been posted and they tell you they're looking for A, B, and C, absolutely you need to hit A, B, and C, but you also need to talk about what you know about that organization. So you are researching the organization and you are telling them why that is a good fit for you. So again, try to use very different types of organizations. Let's say a big global corporation versus a smaller nonprofit, okay? If you were applying for a position there in either of those organizations, you would probably use different wording in your cover letter. So you might have a cover letter saved that is, big corporate cover letter. You might have a cover letter saved that's nonprofit. And then when you go to craft your cover letter, your application cover letter, you will use the appropriate cover letter and make the necessary changes in that cover letter to tailor and target to the employer. So for example, and I have this in an example coming up. If you mention the name of the employer, that's always an excellent strategy to use, is to mention their name. But what you also want to be aware of is that if you use any form of that cover letter in other applications, you had best remove or update the name of that employer. If you include the wrong name of the employer, that will certainly be the end of your application. Good question.
And I have one last question here. Where can I find online databases of employers?
Online databases of employers, I would refer the listener to the Savvy Job Seeker, which is recorded on our website. I talk about researching employers. Obviously, professional associations are a great place. Chambers of commerce, they are great places. But also you can do research online through your campus library, regional library, or just through other databases like Princeton Review, Hoover's. There's a lot of databases where you can go in and search for different employers in different geographic locations or within different cities. I've also mentioned using the business newspaper of any local metropolitan area. So for example, in this workshop, I referenced Louisville First, the business newspaper, the Louisville Business First. And so that's the business newspaper here in town. And other cities will have similar, and they have information on employers. So there's very many different resources out there. And now with the internet, it can be fairly easy to research different industries.
And that's all the questions we have at this point.
All right. Well, coming into the home stretch, to use a horse racing vernacular, I want to talk to you about writing principles. Now, I don't teach people how to write. That probably is more in line with the Writing Center. They can help you with writing. We do help with the editing and the overall content of the cover letter. So these are certain writing principles that I have found that are very important in crafting your cover letter, either an application cover letter or your inquiry cover letter. And so you've heard me say this before: purpose for writing, be clear, and place the most important items first, supported by facts and data and information. And obviously, when you can quantify things, it's always better. You didn't just work with the budget, but you worked with a budget of what? Is it $50,000 or $5 million? You know, depending upon where you are in your career, that would be different. And as I've said, group similar items together in your paragraphs and then organize your paragraphs with the most important paragraph coming at the top, followed by your other paragraphs after that. So I've mentioned that it's a business correspondence, it's a business letter, but you do want to keep it warm and personal and professional. This is usually where I say to students that you do not begin your cover letter by saying, hey. Hey, H-E-Y, is not a salutation. Dear is a salutation. So dear is professional. Hey is more colloquial or slang type of language. So personal, warm, but professional. So you got to have that right mix in there. You know, the next couple of statements here, you want to be brief as possible, write clearly and simply, but also avoid overly complex or overly simple sentences. So you got to find that nice sweet spot there. You don't want sentences with a lot of clauses and phrases in there, and then you don't want just plain sentences. And I've got a couple examples here in a minute that will sort of show you what I've seen in working with students through some of my classes before, and how it goes from overly simple to a more robust paragraph that puts it into context for the reader. So part of putting it into context is active voice and action verbs. You don't want to be passive. I know although we don't overly rely on spell check, grammar check will certainly point out your passive sentences. So that is something to pay attention to. And so you keep the reader's interest by varying your sentence structure and length. Always be positive, always use correct tone and word choice. Another thing I like to point out to students is, we tend to use words that over exaggerate, such as, I would love to work for your organization. Don't use the word love. I would enjoy, it would be an exciting opportunity, but you wouldn't love it, okay? It's just a different way, a different word choice, a different tone. That's the one I see a lot of overused. Also, you want to make certain that, as we've said with the resume, in the cover letter, yes, you need to use spell check, but you also need to have other people proof it, because spell check won't catch certain words. So my favorite word is that is misspelled a lot is liaison. It's got a lot of vowels in there. Make certain that you run spell check and catch it. And sometimes spell check won't catch a misspelling because it is a correct word. I had on a resume one time a student who was listing that he was a shift manager, and he wrote the word shift without the letter F in it. So I'll let you think about that for a moment as to what kind of manager he was portraying there. So real word, not the word that was meant, because spell check didn't catch it. So always focus on how you are writing for the reader and how you are benefiting the reader. So those are some basic writing principles. Some other notes I have here, avoid overusing the word I. This is about you, so you don't need to constantly say, I have, I am, I did. You also don't repeat everything that's on the resume. And as I've talked about, does it flow? Are you connecting it? You don't want to make the reader work to get through your resume or to get through your cover letter. If it's tedious to read, they will just simply move it aside and go on to another one. So make certain that it flows and reads very well. So in the remaining time that we have, I have 3 examples here. I call them descriptive examples. I've used these in classes before. They're actually from some of my students. Going back for some time, I just picked the 3 best ones here as just an example to show you between an okay example and a better example. And so through this, you can think about, are they good examples? If we were together in a room together, we would sort of dissect these and talk about them. So I'm just going to present them here to you in this format as a compare and contrast. So the first okay example here, and my apologies for reading to everyone, but I have excellent communication and organizational skills. I have been involved in several activities on campus. I am currently a media lab tech on campus and help students with computer problems. I say that's okay. Technically, you have a subject, you have a verb, you have punctuation. You are talking about experiences and skills, but it's overly simplistic sentences. They all start with I, and it just doesn't have the story, the motivation for someone to read further. So that's why I tell students, I have seen resumes and I've seen cover letters that are technically correct. They are just not compelling. They are not telling a story. They don't have any personality to them. So this one, I feel, doesn't have much personality to it. A better way of writing this, not saying it's perfect, but a better way, my excellent communication and organizational skills, along with my ability to work well with others, would be an asset to this position. So let me stop there. In that case, you're making an affirmative statement. Okay. It doesn't say I have excellent communication skills. You're saying my excellent communication skills. Likewise, you don't want to have a lot of my's in your cover letter because you're going to vary your sentence structure. A positive attitude and willingness to work hard enable me to apply myself enthusiastically to do the right job. I am an active student and have effectively balanced my academic work with a variety of extracurricular activities. Through my work experience, I have developed computer and problem-solving skills. As a media/lab tech, I utilize my communication skills in helping students understand software programs and in solving both hardware and software problems. So putting it into context, okay, you have communication skills, you have involvement, you can manage and balance things. Put that into context for the reader. And that's where you get something like this. Now, I know I'm showing you this one paragraph out of, taken out of the entire letter. So you have to also take your paragraphs in unison with each other to see again how they flow. So just merely as an example for comparing and contrasting. A second one, I am currently an accounting clerk at a pool care company. I've developed excellent accounting and customer service skills. I am confident I'm ready to co-op in accounting. A co-op position with your company would be an ideal position. Again, it's okay. Although it's a co-op position or internship position, it's okay to talk about how the position would benefit you, but you still want to focus on your skills and what you bring to the employer. So a better example of that, as an accounting clerk for a pool care company, I have learned many basic accounting functions. This position has given me a considerable amount of experience with accounts receivable and payable entries. I am eager to move on to a more challenging position, applying my coursework in accounting. A co-op with your company would be an ideal position for me. My experience in retail has enabled me to develop interpersonal skills, as well as the ability to handle difficult situations as they arise. So you see a little bit more context there. And so finally, for a third example, just one more example to compare and contrast here in terms of writing. I can't teach you how to write, but I can teach you to reflect on and encourage you to reflect on the skills that you gained, how you gained those skills, and to represent those in a way that would be more meaningful to the employers. So finally, I have excellent experience working with people. I provided effective customer service as a sales associate. I am able to work in a fast-paced environment. I am sure I have the skills to do the job. Clearly, very simple sentences. Also, all beginning with I. I have, I am, I am, I have. I see this a lot. So also, I should also interject here, as you've seen in this presentation thus far, I've seen cover letters that have literally been 3 sentences long. You know, we've been talking about 3 paragraphs, 3 to 5 to 7 paragraphs. I have seen cover letters that are 3 sentences long. That actually is not going to cut it. That is really off-putting to the employer, especially if the employer has requested a cover letter. So make certain that you go through the complete process. Making this okay example a better example, and this one goes back several years because McAlpin's long ago has gone out of business and merged with Dillard's. So this example, the student wrote, as a sales associate for McAlpin's, I have developed excellent customer service and problem-solving skills. With McAlpin's recent sale to Dillard's, there have been changes in store policy and merchandise. This has provided me with the opportunity to explain new exchange return policies, answer customer questions, and ensure that the store will continue to provide quality service and merchandise. As is the nature of retail sales, many of these skills have been developed in a fast-paced environment where I sometimes make decisions under pressure. I'm sure these skills would help me as a bank associate for PNC Bank. in an industry where customer service is paramount, in an industry where you've had different mergers and acquisitions and you may need to handle with some of these. You do notice that I bolded this because if you ever use this cover letter to apply to US Bank and it says PNC Bank in there, you've just shot your chances. So you want to always make certain that you edit your resumes and you proof them carefully. So as we wrap up here, you can see from my list here, there's a long list of correspondence. Writing letters, communicating with others is what we do in terms of job searching, putting together our job search strategies. So you'll see at the beginning of this list, I cannot overemphasize in any shape, form, or fashion the value of a thank you letter, either thanking them for the interview, thanking your references for being references, thanking somebody who's shared information with you or who has referred you to someone else. You have networking letters, you have follow-up letters after telephone calls and face-to-face meetings. One of my favorite letters is the resurrection letter, where you've applied for a position and you've heard nothing. So you want to follow up on that application. So you follow up with another letter, not a full-fledged cover letter, and not just a, hey, I sent you an application, what's up? You again want to realize people are busy and make certain that your application comes to the top of the applicant pool. Follow up is a way of showing your interest and is a way of showing that you're a conscientious person and that you want to work for that organization. Another favorite one of mine is the response to a rejection, or as I call it, the thank you for rejecting me letter. So when you're interviewing, you may find that you interview and you do not get hired for the position. That is a great opportunity to thank them for the opportunity for interviewing, to tell them how you were impressed with them, and to encourage them that if they have any future openings to consider you. I have, in my recent history of being a director of a career center, not hired somebody only to hire them for another position that I knew was coming and felt was a better fit for them than the position that they applied for. So good thing that person didn't burn a bridge, okay? So you'll send letters, also withdrawing from consideration. Let's say you are not interested, you just send a nice letter. Also, if you are going to reject an offer letter, somebody makes you an offer, is polite to send a kind response back to them. The acceptance letter, certainly you want to send an acceptance letter, and the employer should send you an offer letter in writing. Should they not do that, you need to take it upon yourself to accept the offer in writing to make certain that you get everything correct. Did they say the salary was $30,000 or was the salary $50,000? Maybe you thought they said $50,000, but $50,000 was total compensation and benefits, and it wasn't the actual annual salary. So these are the things, starting date, that you will want in an acceptance letter. And likewise, you'll have the opportunity to move on to several different jobs throughout your career, and you'll want to make certain that you keep those bridges standing with a well-written resignation letter. So, services, we had a question earlier. We have cover letter tips online at this website. We have our document drop program that you can submit through the form online and have your resume or cover letter come into the Career Center. And then we have a whole host of videos through candidcareer.com. A lot of these are 2 to 5 minute videos. We have several on cover letters, and they are located on our cover letter page with the URL right there on your screen. So with that, we've talked about the cover letter, the purpose of the cover letter, the format of the cover letter, the 2 types of cover letters, the writing style and the tone and such. And we've closed with several different types of examples and other types of letters that you will use in your job search. So the important thing to remember is that developing your cover letter is a process. It is not something you're going to sit down today and do, write, and be done. So with that, I'd like to bring it into final questions that we have.
All right, there's a plane coming over, so I'll give a few seconds before that next question I'll ask. Is it okay or is it recommended to send a cover letter even if it's not specifically requested? And if there's not a spot for that, how can you submit a cover letter?
I always recommend sending a cover letter, yes. So most online programs will have a place for you to submit your resume, your cover letter, and then other, okay? In some cases, University of Louisville, for example, where they only allow you to attach one document when you apply to the university, and we always request resume, cover letter, and a list of references. So all those documents have to be combined into one and then uploaded. So you can combine resume and cover letter into one document and upload it if you're applying through a website. If you're applying to a person, you can send them as two separate documents or two documents combined. But it gives you the opportunity to, as I've said in various ways, to elaborate on your resume and how it fits this employer and this opportunity.
And the next question is, should I include salary information or discuss salary needs in my cover letter?
I would say no. I would say this is not the time to bring up that. This is where if the employer has not asked for any of that information, then you should not volunteer that information. Those are things that would come further down the line. Obviously, you should do some research and know, if you're applying for a coordinator position versus a manager position versus a regional manager versus a vice president, you will know through some type of research that there's different types of salaries associated not only with the titles but also within the given fields that you're applying. So not at this stage. Your first and primary goal is to get an interview. Sometimes in the process, if you are a mid-level career person, they will screen you and tell you what the salary range is. Sometimes they will ask you for your salary history, which is now becoming out of vogue and in some places is considered illegal, but not in all places. So you can't make a blanket statement about that. In salary history, what you have made is different than your salary requirements. What do you want to make in this position? And when and where possible, I would avoid answering that question. Because if they like you, if they feel you are the person for the position, there could be a possibility that they could do better on that offer.
The next question is, how long should I wait to follow up after sending my cover letter?
I would generally say about a week. I wouldn't go longer than a week, and I wouldn't do it the next day or two. So yeah, generally a week.
And let me check. I think that's all the questions that we have so far. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the time. And remember, everyone, that we have your presentation coming up next month in July, Interviewing Like a Star, correct?
Yes, that will be held on Wednesday, July 8th at noon. So you can register for that event on Handshake and get the link to attend. And we'll be talking more about how to interview using the STAR technique.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, and we hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you next month.